And the impact that this man has had on my life and the senior leaders here, and therefore on our whole church, is incredible. So would you give a warm welcome to Jack Welch?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, Jack, you retired from GE. You had 300,000 employees. It was one of the largest companies in the world. And some people think that you just retired and played golf, but you never retired from leadership. Tell us what you're leading these days.
Well, before I do that, Bill, I'd like to congratulate you, although it's a tough act to follow Kirk Cousins, who did some job here today, didn't he? I mean, it's incredible. What a guy. I know I'm out running private equity companies. We have 24 companies. But I've started a school called the Jack Welch Management Institute. It's a graduate school for MBAs, working adults, if you will. It's 100% online. We've grown in 4 years from 0 to 1,000 students, fully accredited, and we've got 38-year-old students as the average age, and they're growing, improving, and we're teaching them the real rudiments of management, not highfalutin theory, but how to hire, how to grow, how to build, how to do all these things with people. And it's the most satisfying thing I've ever done in my life. We got 75% of our people get promoted while they're in school, in their companies, and the average raise of our students is 18%. And so it's been the most rewarding thing to see these people flourish and grow. And on this book tour that we've been all over the country on, I keep meeting students who grab you by the arm and say, thanks, my life has changed. I mean, it's the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life, Bill.
Okay, so while you've been doing this additional leading that you've been doing of those 24 companies and this new grad school, you wrote a book recently with Susie, your wife, called The Real Life MBA. And I've read it twice. I think it's one of the best leadership books that I've read in recent days. And I want to ask you a couple of questions right from it, because some of this stuff you haven't ever revealed anywhere else. You say that leaders, senior leaders, need to be chief meaning officers. We always hear chief executive officers, chief operational officers, chief meaning officers. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I think every one of us in this room who might manage 2 people or 5 people, 50 or 5,000, have a responsibility. There's a real problem out there. A Gallup does a poll every quarter, and they poll 12,000 Americans in the workforce, professionals, and they ask them about engagement, employee engagement. Are they engaged? Do they like the work? Are they growing? 65% of American workers today are not engaged. Imagine that. Imagine a football team where 65% of the players stay on the sidelines. You wouldn't have a hell of a good team. It just wouldn't be strong enough. And therefore, that's the same thing we all have. Why would we waste these wonderful people who are there because we're not giving their work purpose? We're not making it a job where we give them a vision, where they can go, how they can grow, how they can make their lives better, how they can make their children's lives better. It's a shame. It's a crying shame. So every one of us in this room, you, me, all of us, we've got to give our employees, as I said, whether it's 2 or 5 or 10, we've got to give them a reason for being there. We've got to show them a future. We've got to tell them how they can do it better. We've got to tell them how they can grow. You spend so many hours of your day at work. Can't waste them. You can't waste them. They got to be a joy in your life. You can't have it be drudgery. You just can't. And we all have that responsibility, every one of us. It's not just the boss. It's every one of us all along the line that have got to give people meaning to their work, just as we are in this church here today on Father's Day.
So, Jack, another thing that you said to me when I first met you, and you, if you were a preacher, you'd pound the pulpit on this. I know you would. You say that every worker deserves to know where they stand with the boss in the organization. Why do you feel so deeply about that?
You know, it's frightening. my wife and I have spoken to over 1 million people around the world in audiences like this over the last 10 years. And you ask people, do you know where you stand in your company? Do you know where you're going? Do you know what your boss thinks of you? Do you know what your company thinks of you? Do you know what your next steps are, what the vision for your future is? We don't get 15% raising their hands. Can you imagine that? It's a moral responsibility of leadership to let every person know where they stand. How would you like to come to it? We have a story about our daughter. Our daughter is a 25-year-old young woman in the West Coast in Hollywood in casting. And she lives and dies over her boss's shoulder movements, or smiles, or grunts, or groans. And she'll call her mother, oh, I've had a terrible day. Why? He didn't smile all day, her boss. This guy is controlling my life. And I don't even know him. But I'm not very fond of him, I'll tell you that. And this past fall, she got a raise. And she called us cheerfully to announce she's got a raise. Now, being the daughter of the two of us is not particularly an easy program on something like that. So we said, why? She said, I don't know. I don't know. We said, get back in there and find out. Well, you can imagine this program. She's going in like this into the office to ask this fellow who's not very emotional, why did I get this raise? She can't say her parents are demanding it. I said, she's got to find out. So she goes in and he says to her, merit. She comes back and calls us proudly, merit. We said, what do you do with that? What do you do with merit? Every one of us has an obligation to tell our people, here's what you can do better. Here's what I love about what you're doing. And put it, I used to do it on a little card every quarter. Here's what the 3 things I like about what you're doing, handwritten, and here's what you can do to improve. And do it in writing. Do it by hand if possible, because it shows you put some effort into it. And engage for 10 or 15 minutes with the people about that, so they know where they stand. Talk about their future with them. Every one of you, when you go to work Monday, think about that. Think about, are you responsibly growing your people? They're like flowers to you. Grow them. Put the water on them. And sometimes the flower garden turns into some weeds. And you're going to have to remove people. We've talked about that, Pastor Bill.
Yeah, and I was surprised one time when we were talking, you asked me, do I replace people who need to be replaced? And I said, well, I do. It's always unpleasant, and I have to work up the courage and all that. And you said something, and I've quoted you all over the world. I always give you attribution. You said a phrase that I use all the time. Our staff uses it now. You say when you're making people appraisals and tough personnel evaluations, the kindest form of management is the truth. You're not being kind by withholding information. You say the kindest form of management is the truth.
Yeah, and the cruelest is not telling people where they stand. Guess what happens when a recession comes in 2008? You, the boss, call me and tell me I've got to get some costs out. So I go in to take people out of the job because I've got to get the costs out because my boss is yelling at me. Pastor Bill. So I go and do this, and I go up to Mary and I say, Mary, I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. And Mary said, why me? I said, well, Mary, you're really our worst employee. And Mary says, I've been here 31 years. Why hasn't anybody told me? How many times do you think that happens? It happens way too often, far too often. Because people think, I'm too kind to tell Mary 25 years ago how she could have improved, how she could have done better. I'm a coward. I call myself, I'm too kind a manager. No, you're a weak coward. That's what you are. And you end up destroying people over that behavior.
Yep. Yeah, I've never forgotten it. We use it daily. The kindest form of management is the truth. Hey, I felt that one particular chapter in this book was worth the price of the book. I thought it was the best chapter on leadership that you've ever written. It's the chapter on truth and trust. Talk to us about that.
Well, I've written other books, and we've talked about leadership in a variety of ways, the usual passion for it, decisiveness, good to people, grow people. But in the end, what you want to create is an atmosphere, and this is a very hard atmosphere to create. You want to create an atmosphere of openness where truth is the word every day. Now, in a corporation, you get budget reviews, and you get these nonsensical spins going on all the time. People spinning the truth, spinning the truth. You got to talk about it. You got to call them on it. And you've got to, the best way, you all have been through budgets, right? Everybody's done a budget in some ways in a company. What is the budget review like? Let's take Pastor Bill and call him the boss, and I'm the person in the division coming in with my budget. Well, I'm going to come in with 2, and I'm going to spend the next 10 hours or 6 hours or 4 hours with charts trying to prove how tough things are, how difficult the competition is, how brutal it is. So I only have to provide 2 for the year. He's coming in with his good, nice-looking suit on and his staff there demanding 4. We stay in a windowless room, no competitors, nothing happens, and we go back and forth. Guess what the budget is? 3. Always a compromise. Always, like he's like a dentist trying to pull teeth to get me to come up a little bit. And I'm in there holding it. Why? Because if I miss my budget, I get a stick in the eye or worse. So I behave that way. Whereas if there's an atmosphere of truth, I'd come in and say, I need $10 million to buy this. I need to hire 50 people. I'd like to do all these things. And then Pastor Bill looks at me and says, well, we'll do this, we'll do that, we won't do that, we won't do this. But we'll stretch and reach. And it won't be an exercise in minimalization, how little I can do. It'll be an exercise in how much we might be able to do. And I have enough trust, because we've built that trust over the years, that I know if I don't achieve everything, but I achieve more than we would have the other way, I'll be rewarded. Truth and trust. Proving yourself every day. When you let somebody go, you treat them right. You love them on the way out as much as you loved them on the way in. You earn your trust relentlessly every day. Your every action you make. You give a speech, for example, and you talk about values, and then you hire the jerk. And guess what? Everybody in the place knows it's a jerk. And you lose all of your trust. Every appointment you make is worth 10,000 speeches. Words don't count in corporations. Actions do. And your actions have got to match what you say.
So this was I think we were driving in your car one time, and I asked you of when you look at the top like 5% of leaders, just fabulous leaders, and then you look at the top 1% of the top 5%, I said, what's unique about them? And you used a term I had never heard before, and again, it just rolled right off. You said, they have a generosity gene.
Perhaps not technically a gene, but I would say it's what I use. Think about your bosses. I want you all to go back and think about your bosses and yourselves as bosses. And there are types where people love to give raises. They love to give promotions. It turns them on. They're excited about your achievement. They've got your back all the time. Not the boss that's stealing your idea and passing it on as their own. Not the boss who is trying to put you down. Not the boss who is cheap with raises, that skinflint that's hanging on to the last nickel. They've got a generosity of spirit all about you. So all of you in this room who do lead people, ask yourself, have you got that? Because that in the end is the gift of all gifts. If God gives a gift, he gives you a gift of letting you have the authority of your position to give joy to people who are delivering for you, and you will get it back tenfold. They'll go through walls for you. If you give them that spirit and that warmth and that incredible generosity gene, and it's always in your heart. And when you do it, you'll win big. And if you have to make a tough decision, you'll do it with a generous spirit. The severance dollar is the cheapest dollar you'll ever spend in your life. I met a woman in the book signing before this morning, and she grabbed me and she said, you know, I worked for United Airlines, and in 2008 they let me go. They did everything you said in that thing. They gave me a beautiful severance. They gave me time to get a job. She said, I fly United everywhere now. She said, I love that company. They showed her when they were in trouble a generosity gene, and she'll never forget it. I'll never forget that story. After the 9 o'clock service, it was a moving story, and she couldn't tell me enough about it. It's so meaningful. Yeah. So each of you, if you're going to work on Monday, and you've got some responsibilities about that, look yourself in the mirror. Have I got the generosity gene? Don't complain about your boss. They might not have it. Think about yourself. What can you do to demonstrate it? How can you change the atmosphere of your group by grabbing that gene?
It's awesome, isn't it? I love it. So, Jack, just one more question. At this particular service, we have a lot of young professionals. And when you started working for GE, you were in what you call a pile of probably 100,000 or some big number of people, and you were trying to differentiate yourself, and now you're at the other side of your career. And in this book, again, I hope you'll all get it. It's called The Real Life MBA. But in your book, you say to young people, don't just deliver to your boss. What do you tell them?
Over-deliver.
Over-deliver.
And let me tell you what I mean by that. It's so important to all of you, at any age, but particularly in your starting your career. You're taught in school by the teacher, here's the homework assignment. You do the assignment, and you bring it in, and you get an A, B, or C, or whatever the numbering system is, as a grade, and it's over. On to the next project. That's bad training. That isn't good enough. Because when you go to work and you get an assignment, don't just do it that way. Come in with a new perspective. If you get an assignment to do A and B, do A and B, but that's minimal. Do C and D. That shows a broader perspective. It makes your boss smarter. That's a Boston accent, so it doesn't come across as well as it should. Let me just say this. You really, really want to think about one thing all the time. Every time you go to a meeting, what was the impact on your boss in that meeting or on the team that was there? Did you make people smarter or just go through the motions? Was it a 15-minute, a 30-minute meeting where you just hung? Or was it something that made others smarter? That's what over-delivering's all about. Giving perspective to others so they grow. And when they look, they'll never do anything but take care of you because they need your brain, that you're giving them that extra insight that makes them stronger and better. So think about that as you go to work again on Monday, and think about that opportunity.
I love that, over-deliver. So, Jack, when I first got to know you about 5 years ago, going to church maybe wasn't on your top priority list. And then you started to attend a church a little bit more regularly, and more recently, you go like almost every week. When I met your pastor, I met your pastor. You invited me to, or you introduced me to him, And then you told him, I just overheard the conversation, you had a bunch of people coming with you to your church. So what's changed in you that now you're like going to church and all the rest? What's up with that?
Well, you were clearly an influence when I started this. That speech Bill talked about that he was paid this money that God gave him the idea to go collect. When I got there, I found out it was a church-oriented event. I didn't know it when I was going there. And so I ended up with all these pastors in the room, and what's an Irish Catholic from Boston doing sitting here? And we had an incredible event, and it meant so much to me. And then I met this young pastor, Jimmy Scroggins, down in West Palm Beach. And Jimmy is a West Point cadet who got cancer and left the military and went to the ministry and was cured. He actually had testicular cancer, and today he's a 40-year-old pastor with 8 children, and we say, "We got it, Jimmy, you're cured." and we're trying to slow him down. But so I love this guy, and I'm with him all the time, and he has brought me very close to God, and it's a wonderful thing. And my wife was baptized this spring, and it's been a wonderful journey, Bill, and I think the seeds were sown when I met you.
Let's thank Jack for serving us.
Thank you so much.